Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to today's bonus upload. A bonus to get us that much closer to Saturday Nightmares, live from New York, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I almost said p.m. 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We share experiences, cryptids, paranormal. We just have a whole lot of fun. I hope to see you all there. Before we get into this, though, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go, and folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this bonus upload, shall we? Alright guys, we are going to check out some terrifying encounters and some terrifying video clips. Let's get into it. Today's first encounter. This happened back in the 60s in West Tennessee on our small family farm. My brother, one of his teen buddies, and our mom were the witness. Dad wasn't home and the rest of the kids were not home as well. The boys were 12 to 13 years old. We had a lot of dogs. A lot of these dogs were huge as well. Many hound and shepherd mix. There were at least 8 to 10, maybe more. Those of you who remember back then know that country farm dogs were real dogs. Fearless, naturally aggressive to strangers, as well as extremely protective of their land and owners, especially the kids on the farm. Mutts they may have been, but they meant business. My brother and his buddy decided to camp out in the backwoods behind the barn. They used one of those heavy-duty green canvas military pup tents. This is summertime, hot and muggy. The whole time they were setting up, the dogs that had followed them kept looking off through the trees to the northeast and growling with their hackles up. The boys didn't think much about it, but definitely noticed. And it was still light after all. They just figured other dogs or coyote or maybe a bobcat back in the woods. There was a dirt road that bordered the side of our property, 10 miles of dense, hardwood, old-growth forest. There were no houses anywhere near ours in that direction. As they got camp set up and a fire going, by this time it was dark and they kept noticing the dogs were growling more attentive and restless. There was also a storm blowing in from the southwest. They could hear low rumbles of thunder way off in the distance, but this is still natural for the area of the country and common in the summers, and really no cause for concern. They'd got the fire going and were making their grub when the dogs all became instantly alert and began to growl and move out to investigate, still in one direction, into those thick woods. Some of the dogs actually ran into the woods and the boys could hear the dogs getting really excited. Some of the dogs actually held back and stayed close to the boys. These dogs were actually trembling and whimpering, something they'd never seen our dogs do before. They were just under their feet. They could tell they were scared as well. My brother whistled the dogs back and they came running with their tails tucked and looking over their shoulders. It was obvious they were scared. When the dogs got back to my brother and his buddy, they were right under their feet and acting skittish, whimpering, whining, and shaking, hackles up. And they surrounded the boys, and it really spooked them because they could tell that the dogs wanted to protect them. The boys knew something or somebody was out there watching them. They could even sense it. The thunderstorm was getting closer and the wind began to pick up. plus the night sounds had stopped back then in Tennessee in summer. You could just about determine where anybody or anything was in the woods or around you just by the sounds of the night insects and the frogs and all. When something is there, they go quiet. It's very eerie. And with the cloud cover and all of it, it was just a southern pitch black night. Well, my brother and his friend decided to move camp closer to the house, so they broke camp. The whole time the dogs are just freaking out, growling, and the boys could tell whatever was out there could not be good. They finally got the tent set up in the backyard, dogs underfoot the whole time. The dirt road was closer to the house as well. About the time they get the tent up, Mom comes out on the back porch and asks what's wrong and why the dogs are carrying on. She could tell the dogs were upset and the thunderstorm was getting closer. The boys told her how the dogs had been acting, and she could see the dogs were alerting on something up across the road in the woods. So she told them to come into the house. So they went in. Well, the dogs kept barking and going crazy. The storm was moving in and the wind had really picked up. It wasn't raining, just lightning and thundering with wind gusts. Mom would go out on the back porch and look, but she never saw anything. After a couple of hours, the dogs went ballistic. I mean, like they were going to kill something. Mom said they were almost screaming, and she never heard dogs make those kinds of sounds. They were very frightened and also vicious. So my mom and brother get up and look out the windows in the backyard where the tent was set up. It was 60 feet from the corner of the house under a white oak tree. Mom is looking out the bathroom window, and my brother is looking out the bedroom window. Across the dirt road, moving through the trees, was a glowing, transparent, man-shaped green light, moving just like a person would move if they were taking their sweet time walking on a sunny day. The dogs are just screaming and surrounding this thing. Some of them are lunging at it, and others are just howling like it's Judgment Day. The thing is just ignoring them. That man-shaped green glowing thing just kept moving right toward the tent in the house. It never hesitated or paused or a thing. Even with all the dogs going crazy, it was like those dogs were not even there. This thing walked right up to the tent, stopped, and turned and looked directly at my mom through the bathroom window. Then it squatted down just like a man would and opened the flap of the tent and leaned in partially inside. The dogs are still lunging, growling, snarling, barking, jumping, running, surrounding this thing, and it's not even noticing them. The whole tent is lit up just like you'd turn a green lantern on inside it. It stayed there for a few moments. The whole tent was just lit up, glowing a bright green. Then it just leaned back out, stood up, looked at my mom again through the bathroom window. It just stood there for a few minutes, looking at the house and her. Then it just turned around and walked back in the exact same path up the hill, back across the road, into the trees, with the dogs still going after it. They followed it up the road and kept raising Cain until it disappeared way back into the woods out of sight. Same place it had come out of, still acting like those dogs were not even there. The next morning, my mom and the boys all went outside and walked around the tent, checking the tent. Nothing looked out of place. The dogs would not go near it. They would come close, and their hackles would raise, they'd whine. A couple of dogs raised their legs and marked the perimeter, but they sniffed around the spot for days. They all described what they saw as a green, glowing, see-through man. The one thing that did stick out was they could not see its feet. They could make out the rest of the features, just not the feet. My mom thought that was the weirdest part. Our family was and still is Christian. Mom said she just said a prayer, but for some reason she said she wasn't afraid that bad. She was mighty concerned, but she said if it had kept coming toward the house, she would have been scared. But she said when she said a little prayer, she felt okay. Man, that's pretty terrifying. Kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Hopkinsville goblins or a crawler or something. There are so many kind of bad things, strange things being spotted as of late. We really can't put a name on all of it. And we really can't discredit any of it either. Absolutely terrifying, but interesting in the same sense. And today's first video we are going to check out is what appears to be a dog-like creature running up through the street lights, and it looks like whoever is filming this is obviously filming it from safety, but you can see this creature moving in a quadruped motion, and it is huge. Let's check it out. That, my friends, is definitely a creepy video clip. I'm not sure what it is, but it is creepy. On to tonight's second encounter. Tonight's second encounter comes to us from Louisiana back in 1993. At the time in my life, I was a co-leader of a boys' club in the community. There were quite a few young men whose dads had flown the coop or their moms had them out of wedlock in the surrounding area. We were providing a venue for these young men to get together with some big brothers or fatherly type figures for their lives. The boys were very much appreciative of what we were doing, and on many occasions we planned some outings for the day, which on this particular day happened to be going into the swamps on some boats. There was hardly a house in the area at the time that didn't have, at the very least, one of these little tin boats, and we had brought 4 of them with the boys via pickup trucks and vans down by the swamp to launch. We had one 12-footer and 3 14-foot boats at our disposal, all of which were fairly lightweight, being made of aluminum, and they were easy to slide in and out of the pickup truck beds upon arriving at the launch site. I and 2 other young men, with the assistance of the boys, slid the boats into the water in preparation for the day's activities. Now, to set the stage for this event, this is a place on the extreme edge of what you would call rural. Most of the houses in the area would be called shacks by the majority of Americans, with very few inhabitants living in the surrounding area. Simply put, it meant that if you got in trouble around these parts, you were indeed in trouble with no help around. We weren't going far, and the boats were equipped with electric motors and car batteries with oars as backup if need be. Our plan was to do an exploratory stint for a couple of hours, check out some critters in the swamps, and believe me, there are more than a few critters in there. Some of them could do you in if you're not careful. For the first 45 minutes or so, the young men were a little rambunctious, but things started to calm down a bit. We were slowly meandering around, pointing out a variety of birds and things, with the men and boys in the boats discussing what they were seeing, when we decided to take a slight detour into the trees and more flooded areas of the swamp. We were negotiating the trees and passages through the flooded woods. And one of the boys said, "Look, what's that over there?" There were many things in here which swam in the water, alligators, but this was no gator, as far as I'm concerned. We were all well focused on it, and me, it appeared to have the head and shoulders moving through the water, but of what I had no idea. I had seen everything that swamp had to offer, as far as aquatic creatures went, but I had never seen anything the likes of this. I was thinking for a moment that it had the head and shoulders of a large deer, perhaps, but that thought just passed. I say this because it really didn't remind me of anything, but my mind couldn't accept what I was seeing. It seemed to be the upper body of something enormous that was actually walking in the water up to its shoulders. We could see no hands or arms, if they were there. They were submerged, as whatever this was seemed to just be walking up to its neck in the water. The more I focused on it, the more I was convinced that it was an enormous pair of shoulder muscles tapering out to about ear level on the head that I was seeing. No sooner had that thought registered than did the notion of this thing be the Honey Island swamp monster come to mind. Everything that I have just told you took place in 30 to 40 seconds when suddenly this thing was coming out of the water as it was entering in shallow area, heading into the cypress. Within about 10 seconds of seeing this, it had taken possibly 3 strides and was fully exposed. Walking away into the trees, everyone was dead silent as we watched this massive creature walk away. Turning its head slightly, it looked our way without missing a step and then quite literally disappeared into the trees and hanging moss. I saw it come in and out of view maybe 4 or 5 times as it did so, and it was gone. Our jaws were agape as we looked at each other and then back in the direction of where this thing had gone out of view. And then we began to talk. All who had heard of the monster were in full agreement that that was what we had just seen. And as far as those in the group who hadn't, well, they were now believers as the rest of us. At the moment when we had first seen it, the group was exceptionally quiet, and with the electric motors humming along, we were actually moving at a pretty good clip through the calm waters. We had obviously caught this thing unaware as we were navigating a deep trough to get where it was going. I don't believe it would have trapped itself in deep water had it seen us beforehand. When it emerged from the water, it was covered in soaking wet long hair that clung to its form of a huge muscle-bound body. The monster was all of 7 foot and covered ground very quickly and quietly as it slipped into the trees and out of our sight. Now, a lot of people think that the Honey Island swamp monster is a Dogman or a Bigfoot. Just the other day, I had discussed another experience in Louisiana with kind of a similar creature. I'm not sure what this is. They may very well be just a kind of canine-like cryptid, or some kind of throwback, who knows? But it is definitely terrifying, and people in Louisiana around that area have seen it, many of them. So the next video clip is very, very terrifying. To me, it looks like some sort of enormous creature coming out of the shadows in a cemetery and just walking through. I believe this is security footage of that security CCTV footage of the cemetery. That's how it was taken. It is creepy. You guys decide whether it's real or not. Man, cemeteries are creepy enough, but to see something like that creeping around a cemetery is definitely kind of icing on the cake. On to tonight's final encounter. It was 1987 that my friend and hunting partner John and I had gone ashore on Vancouver Island, hunting for Roosevelt elk. It was on our second day in, hiking north and making our way through the timber on a heading which would bring us to the shore that the roaring began. At the time, we both looked at each other and said, "Grizzly." I say grizzly because there were two different distinct roars, which we were hearing, one being much deeper than the other, but what exactly was going on, we had no idea. I knew it was not very close, and we decided to step the pace up, heading in the direction of what we were hearing, until perhaps we could see the source without endangering ourselves in the process. The roaring had been going on for almost 10 minutes, and it was definitely getting louder, a sure indication that we were going the right way. So we slowed our pace. The visibility was not great, and we knew there were many bears in the area as well. We came to a rise in the woods, and we reached its precipice. We looked down over the timbered hillside, which met the water below. There was another smaller island in view, perhaps 1,000 yards across this body of water. It was then, as this violent roaring continued, that we saw a flash of dark brown pass between some trees below us, which was followed by what appeared to be a dark gray figure, and the same brown flash coming back the other way across this break in the trees. The growling and shrieking roars were so immense that they almost sounded as if they were screams of pain. The two of us believed we were watching two grizzly bears fight each other, one being older and somewhat gray, and the other being dark brown. From our position, we could just see the edge of the shore and not much else, so we edged a bit closer. The fight had been going on for at least 20 minutes, and it did not sound like it was going to let up. We stopped in a spot where there was more visibility in the direction of the struggle, but still we couldn't see a thing. It was then that we heard what sounded like a deep shriek, which was followed by a loud splash, like a tree falling in the water. Moments later, we saw what appeared to be a darker brown animal swimming in the water, heading toward this smaller island, apparently escaping from the fight defeated. All we could see was the head above the water and the weight created by its swimming. As this beast was about 50 yards off the shore, we heard a loud howling roar, which was followed by a large piece of tree limb hitting the water behind the swimming creature, and all went quiet. We sat there watching this animal swim for about 15 minutes, being absolutely mesmerized by what had just happened. All we could see was the dark head above the water and nothing more of its body. It was at that time, 15-minute mark, which John said to me, "I wonder what happened to the gray one." It was funny because I was thinking that very same thing. Suddenly we heard what I will describe as a half cough, half grunt. It sounded like a monster clearing its throat. That's the only way I can describe it. This was followed by a lot of sounds of crashing and breaking of branches. Whatever was making the noise was not trying to be quiet, and it was heading up the slope toward us. John and I, fearing the worst, that this angry gray bear was now heading towards us, hunkered down between two large trees with our rifles pointed toward the oncoming bear, or so we thought. 2 minutes or so later, down and off to our left side, we saw a mammoth-sized gray and white Bigfoot passing through the trees and moving south. All I can say is thank God it did not see us. My entire body began to shake and quiver, and John's eyes were as big as pancakes. This thing was walking through the trees at a rapid pace and shoving everything and anything out of its way, grunting and huffing as it walked. In about 30 seconds, it was all over, and we were there stunned, looking in the direction it had walked. We had forgotten all about the swimmer, and as we turned our heads, it was no longer visible in the water. Either it had swum out of view and made it all the way to the island, which in and of itself was a magnificent feat of strength and endurance. This gray Bigfoot had to have been 9 feet tall and perhaps 2 feet deep in a side profile. The head appeared to be 2 feet tall in of itself, and was shoved down within its shoulders. I saw its brow was hanging over the front of its face, which made it appear to be rather grotesque. Its skin was dark and weather-beaten, looking as though it had been cracked and dried, like worn-out, sun-beaten leather. We sat there for almost an hour, knowing we had to head back in the direction which this monster had just traveled, and we were not looking forward to it. Over the next few days, nothing further had been seen or heard, and believe me when I tell you, that was enough for a lifetime. And tonight's final video is some sort of creature in the woods. I'm not sure what it is, but once again, I'm going to leave it to you guys to decide. All right, folks, I hope you all enjoyed this bonus upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives people a place to share their experiences, ideas, and theories, judgment and ridicule-free, simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.